my morality is a silk dress, and it's basically one huge cloth, and it's just sewn together by this one thread, and that thread is God and Christianity. And the more I stay in this place of like being unsure, not believing, the more I'm pulling the thread out, and my morality is slipping away. Hi, friends. Thanks for joining me once again. If you're new here, my name is Lusanda, and I'm so glad to be back. I know it's been a minute, but I'm back with a story. I'm going to be sharing with you guys my story of how I became Christian again. So, I grew up a pastor's kid. My parents were pastors from before I was born. And I know some people come into it later, their parents have a conversion, but I was born into the church, into the faith. And I have memories of, at a very young age, maybe 6 or 7, having these intense emotional experiences with God. And I didn't know it was God at the time. My mom would then explain the stuff later, but I'd come back from school, just a little girl who wants to play, wants to have fun. And there'd be a song maybe playing just in the lounge, it'd be on the radio. And I would just feel something tugging at my heart. And at that time, I didn't even know how to pray or anything. I would just cry and cry and I didn't know what it was. And then later, and my siblings would be worried because my siblings are all younger than me. So they'd just be creeped out, like, what's happening to our sister? Is she okay? And then my mom would, find me there crying, and she'd be like, oh, what's happening is that God is touching you. It's because this music is playing and God is speaking to you, and you can pray like this. And she explained all of it. But that's also to say that honestly, from a very, very young age, I have memories of feeling the presence of God. I have memories of being at conferences and just getting prophetic words from people. And honestly, I had no doubts in my mind. It was very easy for me. I probably obviously said the prayer of salvation a number of times. I know people remember like, oh, I accepted Jesus when I was 4 years old. I can't remember a specific time. I probably did it all the time. I just always wanted to give my heart to Jesus. And yeah, there was no doubt in my mind. It was the obvious thing. Jesus is the King of the world. He loves us all. He's going to save us. There's heaven, there's hell. It was all very simple for me. And yeah, I was very involved, very bossy. I would make people in my primary school pray. Yeah, I would do that at break time, and I'd tell them really scary stories I heard from my grandma about like the rapture. And yeah, it was pretty wild. I actually have, if you're out there, her name is Sumaya. If you're out there, I'm so sorry. I had a Muslim friend. I tried to make her denounce, you know, her religion and take up Christianity, but it was very forceful. Look, this is like a dark side of my faith. I wasn't all cute and just like, oh, I love Jesus. I was very, as a missionary kid, and it's not like my parents instructed me to do any of this. But anyway, that's all just to paint the picture of how deep within it I was when I was younger. Got to high school, still on fire for Jesus, part of dance groups, youth ministry, just really sold out for God. Never had doubts of who he was and how powerful he was. Had very intense experiences, encounters with him all the time. And our church is pretty prophetic, and like, so we were comfortable in the prophetic, just hearing from God. That was very normal, right? And then fast forward to the final year of high school. I was with a friend of mine. We were evangelizing, so on fire. We just read some book, and it was about like, don't be selfish with the gospel, share it with everyone. So we were doing that with our time. And I remember having a conversation that changed my life. I walked up to a group of guys who were about a grade younger, a grade below us, and we started having this conversation. We want to tell them about Jesus. And so we started, I don't really remember what we said, but the one guy asked me a bunch of questions that really got me thinking. He said, don't you think that you would just be as passionate if you were Muslim? And it was the Islamic people who'd come here before the Christians did, to give you this message. All that to say, it's not that special. It's not that special that you're a Christian. It's not like God chose you, and it's all based on who got to Swaziland first, with their message. And it really hit me. It just made me feel like, wait, what? And there's a bunch of questions he asked. Honestly, I don't remember the specifics, but he made me think a lot about why I believe what I believe, if it doesn't have to do with my parents and just how I've grown up. Have I ever questioned, why other people believe differently? Are they bad people for believing that way? And then it just started. There was a ripple effect of just like these questions that were birthed in me. And it probably didn't take me long to then decide that I was atheist. Yeah, it was just a series of questions that I was struggling to answer that my parents had never even addressed. I don't know if I posed these questions to them, but yeah, I asked myself these questions, and when I couldn't find the answers, I just felt like I'm just brainwashed. I'm just believing all of this stuff because it's convenient. It makes sense. This family and friends and my whole life has been around this whole religion. But what if God's made up? Okay, I didn't mean to get into it this much, all the thoughts that I went through. But I know there's some people out there who could definitely identify. There's some people who also grew up Christian and then started having these thoughts. And it happens. It really does. I think at some point, because I am back in the faith now, I think it was super important so that I can be anchored. By the time I do have faith again, there's so many questions that I can answer just for myself. I may not have the answers for everyone else, but I can definitely, I know the answers for Lusanda. And so, yeah, that went on for about the next 4 years, I would say, from 2012 to 2016. And after a couple of months, maybe 2013, I'm not sure what happened, but as I was exploring all of this now, because then I was on a quest for my own light, my true light, my own understanding and what works for me. And so on that journey, I started to feel like perhaps there is a higher power. I don't know. I don't really have answers for you. Like, this is how to find your faith again. Not exactly, because I don't remember the details, but I did think there was a higher power. I did feel like there's a bunch of stuff that science and just a bunch of things we can't really account for. And I think there is a spiritual realm that exists. But still, I wasn't sure about Jesus, about any other religion. So I started to, when I went to university, I started to explore. There were these guys that would hand out, by the school, that hand out these books about like Hare Krishna or like maybe Islam or just like different religions, Hinduism, Buddhism. And so I take all of the stuff. And I was a little scared because obviously I grew up Christian. So when I have this book lying by my bed that's got like a god with like 6 arms, I'm like, but I'm going to read it because I have to find my truth. And so I started reading up on all these different religions. And it all sounded similar to me in the sense that it's still just religion. Who's to say, like, how do I pick which one to follow? Because they all sound the same. It could just be someone saying this. How do I know any of it is real? And Christianity didn't seem any different either. It was just like, it's just one of the religions. But then the more I researched, the one thing that did change my experience was that, just this feeling of like, wait, was Jesus even a real person? And then discovering, okay, he was. There are things that prove that he did live. Of course, now the question for a lot of non-believers is he, did all that stuff actually happen? Him then healing people and then dying and then rising again? That's the question. But the question of his actual existence, that he lived, there's no question of that. He was a man that existed. So I don't know why, but that actually helped me on my journey, just being like, okay, this was a real person and who's made ripples in the world. There must be a reason why he got so famous, so popular. And so, yeah, it was on and off. I never quite left the church because where I live, you have to go to church. You just do. You're under my roof. We're going to church on a Sunday. That's just what we do. Yeah, there's never a question of that. And I also was just used to serving and just being part of some sort of church family. So even at university, I did plug into a church and I was serving and I would listen to sermons and stuff. But I just felt like, is any of this stuff real? But I like the people. Church is quite nice. People are friendly. You have a community. You're meeting up with people, especially because I was far from home. It was nice to meet people outside of class as well. So yeah, church helped me with that. But midweek, I'd also be attending like Hare Krishna meetings and just whoever invited me, I'd just be like, okay, I'm going to come to your meeting and see what you guys are about and learning all of that. And it was so frustrating for my parents, especially because they just didn't know what to do with me. And I was very honest. I was not a secret atheist. I was just like, sorry, parents. Our beliefs just do not align right now. So I hope you guys will respect that, be okay with that. Yeah, that's me. That's who I was. And so I kept searching and just, I think around 2015, I started having these moments of like, we were, and thank you, Jesus, for this church, because it was such a lovely church. Just these moments where we'd be singing and worshiping, and then I just kind of feel that breeze again, kind of feel that presence of God. And not necessarily like a physical sensation, just like maybe in my heart, or just as we were singing, something would happen, I'd feel something. And still, I had a whole bunch of theories to explain it. Like, of course, God is convenient for human beings. We're very good at creating stuff like that. It helps us to deal with all the questions that we can't answer. So I was kind of crazy, but I still felt what I felt. I won't even lie. I really feel like God's presence was still just chasing after me in those moments, even though I couldn't fully accept that it was him and it was specifically Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. Christianity is very radical, like Jesus is not just like, oh, I'm just one of the prophets. When you're in it, you're in it. I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can get to the Father except through me. That was extremely difficult to accept. It's a very bold statement, very unapologetic and radical, and just like, yeah, it's this way or the highway. And so I was still on this journey. I was with these girls. And then I was finally vulnerable with some people from that church as well. Just like, guys, actually, I struggle to believe. I'm in and out all the time. Obviously, being in the church space, I am exposed to a lot of this truth and this kind of thinking. And so that does help me constantly, question it. Versus if you're completely removed from the church, it's very easy for you to slowly even forget what they believe, why they believe it. But versus in this space, I'm constantly having to confront the stuff. Again, I grew up a church girl. I couldn't leave completely. Like, I couldn't. And I think it would have been better for me if I'd found a different religion that I really felt I could subscribe to. But I didn't. So I was still searching, and I was also giving the church a chance, I think that's also the difference when you leave from a place of, there's sometimes people leave Christianity from offense and pain, like, God, you weren't there, I expected you to be there. And so it's hard for you to even give him a chance because you're actually angry and versus curious. And I think that's such an important difference when you are trying to find answers, because it can be a little hard, for him to get through. He's not going to be forceful. And especially if you're angry, and especially if you're just like, you're not even real because I'm at it. Not that he can't, God can do whatever he wants. He can encounter you even in that state. But I feel one of the biggest differences, like the reason why it was possible for me to come back to this place where I gave God a chance, was because I then became curious and not simply offended and dismissive. So 2015, I've spoken to these girls. They start praying for me. My family, my friends had been praying for me that whole time, but still it was just in and out. And finally in 2016, we had a family meeting at the beginning of the year. And my parents I think my dad was just asking us about what we want from God, any desires that we have, and we would pray together as a family, things that we would want to see for the year. And I was just honest with them, like, guys, this has been a battle for like 4 years. I want to believe, I do, but I struggle, And I am a social person. I am a person who really values my relationships. So it was also hard for me, honestly, to feel so disconnected from my friends and family, because I couldn't fake it, right? But I really wanted to be where they were, to see things the way they saw them. And, faith affects a lot of other areas of your life. A lot of everything else that you think is just based on who you believe God is. You know what I'm saying? How to then treat people, how to treat yourself, how to dream, how to think of the future. Like, so much of it is connected to that. So a lot of other parts of my life were kind of falling apart. I'm going to be completely vulnerable with you guys. I remember saying to my friend that I feel like my morality is a silk dress, and it's basically one huge cloth, and it's just sewn together by this one thread, and that thread is God and Christianity. And the more I stay in this place of like being unsure, not believing, the more I'm pulling the thread out, and my morality is slipping away. I won't look, you can think what you want, really. It wasn't that crazy, but I could feel myself wanting to keep a lot of the stuff that I'd grown up believing, but struggling because really God was the glue. And so anyway, at this prayer meeting, I finally told my parents that I want to believe. Please pray for me. And then my dad was like, sure, we could pray. But the reality is that with faith, we don't really come to faith because we understand everything and it all makes sense. You don't come, I think Paul says it as well in the Bibles, that it's not based on, people having convinced you, people coming up with these wonderful words like, oh, I'm such a great speaker, I mean, I'm gonna convince you of this. Faith is taking a risk. And when I was at BSSM at Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, they would always say that faith is spelled RISK, literally. And so my dad was just telling me that if you really want to come back to a place where you believe God, you're going to have to trust that He exists, that he's who He says He is, and then ask Him the questions from that posture. And it's very hard for people. It's very hard for us to let things go and just surrender our reason and our logic. It's extremely challenging. But at that time, I wanted it badly enough to say, okay, I'm going to give this a chance. Because at the end of the day, still, if it really still doesn't come together, then we can't fake it. But at least if I'm at this place where I'm choosing, like I'm just like, okay, God, I'm gonna take the risk. I'm gonna take this risk and just dare to believe that you are who you say you are, that everything that I've heard about you is actually true. But I do have questions for you and I want to know you more. And, I had also at that time discovered some things that felt like were discrepancies in Christianity, things that didn't make sense to me. And so I wanted those answered as well. And it's different standing outside, and I call it the Christian circle, right? And saying, okay, Christians, tell me this, explain this to me, versus saying, I'm going to come into the room, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to listen to you, God, who exists. And I want you to answer this, whether it's going to be through people or music or books I'm reading or however you're going to do it. I'm going to come to you directly and not have this message come to me through my parents anymore or my friends and the people around me. And so I did that. And it was really just a gradual process after that of like fully coming in and just feeling again anchored in my faith. And a lot of times when I tell the story, it feels pretty anticlimactic because people expect me to then to have like a Paul on his way to Damascus kind of moment where then there was a bright light that shone and suddenly God revealed Himself and I was shaking and trembling. I didn't have a vision. And I know some people do have that story, but that wasn't my story. My story is that my faith was just a risk that I took. It was just a decision that I made for many reasons, but it's been the most rewarding thing. And that's why actually eventually I did decide to go to Bible school, because I felt like if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this full on. And it's not going to be a decision that's based on how I grew up or for my parents or for my friends and my community. It's going to be my thing. I'm going to know why I believe. I'm going to be equipped to search the scriptures so I can understand things better for myself. And a lot of questions have been answered over time. In all that the 4 years I spent searching, I didn't find as many answers as I have now in just this time where I've chosen to trust. And so many things have been revealed and so many things make sense. So many things still don't make sense, but I'm also safe. Like I feel safe and held, and I have the relationship with Jesus, which is the most precious thing ever. At least I have relationship with you. And that helps because let's say you're friends with the president. A lot of, stuff could still go wrong in the country, even though y'all are friends. Things could still be crazy. There could still be lots of questions, but you just know that you have a relationship. So you can always ask. You can always consult. No matter what's happening, no matter what chaos may exist, you can always go back to Him. And I think that's just the privilege, the pleasure, and all the beautiful stuff that comes with giving your life to Christ, giving Him a chance, wanting to see. And I've had conversations with people since then. And I think if there's a pastor watching this or a minister or a super Christian, you may not be pleased with the way I'm going about it. But some people have been referred to me like, oh, talk to Lusanda. She had her whole faith thing. And I never say to people, oh, here are all the answers. I just say, just watch the posture of your heart. Watch where your heart is. And how you're asking God these questions. Because if it's from offense and like you barely believe that He's there, or it'll be hard. for you to hear him when he does speak, versus just being like, I'm going to give this a chance. I know it doesn't make sense. I know there's 100 things that I don't understand yet, but I'm going to take the risk of trusting and hoping that things will be answered, that I will encounter God, that I will, be saved and healed, and he will come through for me. And he does. He really does. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, that's all I have to share. Please make sure you subscribe to my channel. I'm looking at my stats, and a lot of you have not subscribed yet, and I'd really appreciate it if you did and shared the story with your friends. It might encourage someone. It might make you giggle. Some of you may be scandalized if you go to my church, like, how was the pastor's daughter atheist? I was. But I'm here now, and I can't wait to keep sharing with you guys on this channel. So yeah, like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.